Gallant and George here on ESPN 97.5 and 92.5. Right now, we have Jeremy Booth joining us here in studio on Twitter _Jeremy Booth, baseball analyst for KHOU. Jeremy, how's it going?
It's going good, man. It's going good. Excited to be here. Looking forward to this.
Yeah.
Been a lot of fun. It's not Halloween, but, left the pumpkins at home, thought about it, but we're here.
Yeah, man. So, obviously, we first started talking about this when you first came up with your statement and your take about Yordan Alvarez.
Yep.
And then him batting second, lineup construction. I pushed back right away.
You pushed back and then some.
I
Joe.
called you a clown. I'm not going to ignore it. I'm not a fraud. I'm not going to be scared in this moment, but I did it. Now that you're sitting next to me, and
He's so big, isn't he,
You're
Joe?
so much bigger than me. Never again. Life lesson learned. Never again. I'm 5'6". I got to remember that sometimes.
Yeah.
So
I get that a lot. I'm 6'5".
yeah,
So,
I can tell.
Yeah. Anyway.
But so Joe Spada was just on doing an interview talking about the lineup construction. Do you feel differently now before we really get into it? Like when you made that statement about the Astros and the issues they were having, do you still feel like that's the prevalent number one issue with the Houston Astros?
It's not the number one issue with the Astros, but it's 1 and 2.
Okay.
And so what I mean by that is you've got injuries on the pitching staff that no one thought were going to be there. 2 or 3. You knew McCullers was out, Garcia was out, but you don't know that Verlander's going to get sidelined. You don't know that Urquidy's going to go down, right? And so you've got really with 16, 17 arms to get to 12, and all of a sudden now you're just at 12, right? And that includes the guys I'm talking about in AAA that have to come up and pitch. When that happens, it puts much more stress in the lineup. And to me, the Ohtani argument and the Judge argument don't hold any water whatsoever, because here, and for me having done this my entire life, it's about parades. Parades are what we do when they win the World Series, right? To me, now the standards are different. Get into the postseason. Are you satisfied with that now?
No.
Are you satisfied with that now? No, you're not. In Houston, the standards are up.
Hell yeah.
It's been raised. And so that means we have to do a better job in the baseball industry of getting to the World Series. In New York, go ask them how they feel about not getting the World Series in 400 years now.
Yeah,
it feels like forever, right?
Yeah, they don't know any different.
They don't know any different anymore. And when you go to Anaheim, and even the Dodgers, and I'm from LA. I grew up out there, and the Dodgers in 2020, I'm not taking it away from them, but it was 2020. It's a pandemic, okay? We're not talking 162. So we're not talking about playing in hostile environments. These were controlled environments and controlled stadiums. That, to me, it's a championship, but it's not.
It's fraudulent.
Correct. So when you're looking at that hasn't worked.
So this is my biggest issue with the lineup construction argument that you have, is that still this year, when you look at plate appearances with runners in scoring position, Yordan Alvarez is still third on the team. Kyle Tucker still leads the team. So when you look at it that way, from my perspective, at least, there's nothing wrong with the lineup construction, because he's still getting 25-plus opportunities on the year of getting guys in, and they're failing to do so. Jose Altuve is the only guy in the lineup with an extra base hit of Yordan Alvarez, Kyle Tucker, Alex Bregman, Jose Altuve in a clutch situation after the 7th inning. So that's my number one issue with it right now, is that the plate appearances are there, and that's why I view it differently than what was going on with Ohtani and Judge with the Yankees and the Angels.
So I respect that on the surface. I'll say that.
Okay.
Now. Okay. Now, if you look at it from a deeper lens, and keep in mind my background doesn't allow me just to look at it one way. I see the deeper stuff. I've done it. I've watched guys do it. I've evaluated it, and I'm going to tell you that not all players are the same.
Okay.
And so when you look at that stat, that assumes that you, me, and Paul are exactly the same, that we're going to perform exactly the same in a situation. And that is inherently the problem with analytics when it goes to that level.
Okay.
Now, on the surface, analytics is supposed to show us things we can't see. We use a ton of them, man. It's stuff that I do every day, and there's a reason why in my real life we've got 22 players in the MLB Top 100 from our stuff, because we know how to go ahead and project and qualify and quantify it. Now, with that said, if you are Yordan Alvarez and you're a guy that has hit third and fourth your entire life, and you're a guy that has to see pitches and you want to see how the guy's going to go about it, you need some time to get comfortable, and you're hitting behind Jose Altuve, that's not conducive to that, because he's going to swing. He sees 3.5 pitches in at bat, about that. right? He's going to swing. When George Springer was here, George said to me directly, he said, when I'm on first base, I'm gone on the first pitch because if I don't, guy's swinging the bat. And if you have Alvarez who's got to go ahead and drive the baseball, and I'll stop and say, do either one of you want him hitting singles?
No.
Does that matter?
No.
Okay, so if you don't want him hitting singles, then you have to put him in situations to drive the baseball. That does not mean every time he comes up that's the case.
Okay.
The game changes a pitch at a time within the at bat. If a guy throws a 92-mile-an-hour fastball running away that's got some sink, and let's say Alvarez fouls it off, changes the whole at bat. If a guy throws a breaking ball for a strike, changes the whole at bat. If he misses it, changes the at bat. And so he's number one thing about Yordan Alvarez, Kyle Tucker, and Altuve, and whoever is a produce guy, comfort. If you're not comfortable in that spot, get him out of that spot. Now, a lot of people said that I was an overall Dusty Baker homer. Okay, I know Dusty personally, so I can't separate that or can't say that without getting into disclosing that. Dusty Baker, I thought stuck with people way too long. I thought there wasn't enough fluctuation. There wasn't enough moving guys around. But you don't need to have 17 lineups in the first 22 games either. Mm-hmm. Okay, and so when you're looking at that type of formula, for me, you have to lengthen the lineup to allow other guys to capitalize. If we're not hitting with runners in scoring position, plate appearances aside, something isn't working.
Yep.
And all I was saying at the beginning was, let's not stack our hitters and stack the guys that can be easily pitched to. We can go into Chas McCormick. Got to play every day, right? Got some power. Plays an okay left field. Ain't great. It's okay. Swings and misses a ton. Just a ton. He's your easy 6 or 7 hole hitter. Sometimes even your 8 hitter in today's lineup. You got Jeremy Pena, who's had a rebirth. And when he first came up, I said, we don't know yet. And last year I said, we still don't really know because it's an adjustment, right? You're probably starting to find out about a little bit who he is. Why do you not protect him and put him in the 2-hole? He's the perfect 2-hole guy.
And it was when Dusty was they were most successful, and when Jeremy batted second.
But you know who did that? It wasn't Dusty. Dusty fought that. It was James Click. James Click, the analyst, said, this guy hit second. From a baseball perspective, there's 2 ways to look. No analysis, just raw feel baseball. There is he's new, we got to hide him at the bottom of the lineup. Then there is, we want to make this guy productive. I'm going to put him in what I call the Alex Rodriguez spot. Remember when Alex Rodriguez came to the big leagues? Do you know who he hit ahead of?
Griffey.
That would be Griffey Jr.
Yeah.
You know who else who hit behind Griffey Jr.? That would be Jay Buhner.
Yeah.
You know who hit behind Jay Buhner?
No.
Edgar Martinez. Who you pitching to? Alex Rodriguez. Okay, so when you have that type of lineup, let's take that to the Astros. You've got Hosey, and do what he's going to do. And then you got this question mark. And I don't care what Jeremy Pena does, no disrespect. I'm pitching to him 100 times out of 100 before I'm pitching to Alvarez and Bregman and Tucker and, frankly, even Diaz, right? And so if I can lengthen what I've got by just moving that guy to 2 and everybody goes back 1, because I really, frankly, don't care if Alvarez hits 3 or 4. I don't care. I think he should hit 4, personally, because I want Bregman to be protected, too. Somebody who's had injuries, somebody who can stay on the double play, right? I want to keep those things moving, and I want to get to a place where I've got 1 out in the lineup. I got 1. You're not going to get away from 1, whether it's Abreu, whether it's Myers. There's going to be 1 guy. Who do you want that guy to be? For me, I think Abreu's season's lost is tough. Close.
I mean,
Close.
I don't. You think there's still a chance?
I think he's a chance to be a productive platoon guy. Maybe. And I'd still go get Brandon Belt. Honestly.
Yeah. I know Jeremy Brandon, who I know you're interacting with on Twitter yesterday, like he's been pushing that too. I agree.
I'd get Brandon Belt.
At this point, sign anybody because of,
Sure.
if this platoon, you might
Sure.
get a third person in it. To go back to the way you just laid it out, I think the way that you just laid that out makes a lot of sense. You get a lot of pushback from people on Twitter. And again, Twitter, it's not a real place. It lends itself to confrontation. But what do you think it is about what you just laid out right there that people don't want to agree with you on? Just rubbed his palms. Now he's looking at me. Now he's looking back at the camera.
We are in a city that was sold, and rightfully so, to a point, that the way that it started to win was done under 1 guy. It's false. It's never that way. It's always multiple people that get you there. and it's always multiple front offices that get you there. Since the Ed Wade, Bobby Heck era, which has it's unquestionable. They laid the foundation with Springer and Fulton and Castro and all Correa and McCullough. That's all Bobby and a lot more. Under that group, how many front offices have we had since then?
4.
Okay, and they're still winning.
Yeah.
At least in theory. Okay? That's not one front office. That's not one group for 15 years. There was one group that did one job. There's another group that did another job. Another group did another job, which if you really break it down, James Click and Dusty Baker did a great job of guiding this organization in a very difficult time in a tough situation. They both did a great job. They maybe didn't see eye to eye. They did a great job, and it was very private what was going on, right? And then you have Dana. So start to finish, scouting development, major league acquisitions, steady the ship, back to drafting and development. Make sense? Mm-hmm. That's how organizations run. However, our city and a lot of some of our fellow media members have a tendency to believe that Jeff Luhnow was the second coming, and he's not.
I did create a church in Jeff Luhnow's name back in 2019.
And he
I didn't have a job.
And he wasn't. What he was great at was waiver claims, major league analytics, pitching data. He was ahead of the game in that. He was way ahead of everybody else with that. I understand how to move assets around the trade market and even arbitration. He was great at that. But he was terrible in draft. And it's been proven. And I got a lot of crap for saying stuff like Seth Beer was a bad pick instead of Noah Naylor. How's that working out?
I mean,
okay,
Naylor's obviously a much better player.
Seth Beer, it's never about the pick in the day.
Cool last name, though.
Yeah, it was pretty good. It's never about the pick on the day. It's always about the end result.
Yeah.
So the point is that back to your deal. We have people that just don't want to hear that. They don't want to hear that. They want to hold on to the holy savior. Like saying Jeff Luhnow should be the GM again now with the culture that was created, which, was public on that too, up front, right? With the culture that was created and the way they went about it, that isn't what the organization needs now. What the organization needs, no one's talking about. No, none of us. I'm not doing it. You're not. They need and I'm going to see this guy a lot, and I'm going to say it anyway. They need to let Dana and his company do their jobs.
Yeah, well, that's one thing we talked about. I think it was interesting. It was like right around when you had the Yordan Alvarez stuff. That was right around the same time that Reggie Jackson was on John Heyman's podcast, and he talked about how Biggio, Bagwell, himself, Crane are this special committee that are making these decisions. And what have we seen since they fired James Click? Because he got fired. Like, we all know that.
He did.
Like, they offered him a 1-year contract, but it was really a firing.
Mm-hmm.
They brought in Abreu, Montero, who Montero's look better. Abreu looks awful. And you have Josh Hader, who's like early results are obviously, we all see it, poor. But so how do you stop that? Because it does seem like the biggest issue is in your view, I'm going to put words in your mouth here, so correct me if I'm wrong, is Crane. Because he's allowing that committee to form these decisions.
I'm not going to say it's Jim. Well, if you put it that way, then I can see what you're saying. To me, Jim is the type of guy that he's an accomplished college baseball player. He's obviously an excellent businessman. You don't get to where you are without this stuff, right? But he walked in on an era of a golden era of a club.
Mm-hmm.
He got in and immediately gutted who was here beforehand, or brought in Jeff, who did the same thing. And so all he ever saw was just one way to do it. Then he goes out and he watches player development, and it's not running well. We have to admit that at this point, right? I mean, these guys aren't showing up with any kind of performance. It's not running well. Then he goes and sees the draft, and everybody says it's terrible. I guess guys like me didn't help because I wasn't stroking everybody's ego. I was telling the truth. And he goes in and he watches Bagwell, listens to Jeff, and he listens to Bish. And I spent a lot of time with Bish, and Craig knows what he's doing. He really does, okay? And I'm going to spend some time with Reggie, and Reggie knows what he's doing. What you have, though, oftentimes with former players, in oftentimes, it's not universal, is they see what's in front of their face.
Oh, like the back of a baseball card?
Like that. They get very loyal to their brothers and having done it. And it takes a lot of separation from that to understand it. If you watch Jose Abreu, and again, just going to say it because it's come up. If you watch Jose Abreu, 2 years ago, his bat speed was gone. And do you know how you can tell? Because he's so short and forced to the baseball, he doesn't have the ability to get any length and get any power.
Yeah, I mean, you look at his numbers when he was in Chicago, like everything was going oppo. And then it was the doubles were there that last year in Chicago, but the home runs were not there. And then they still gave him this massive contract that they're stuck with. like at this point. So when you look at this team now, what is, and we were joking around about this Chronicle article that came out, and it was literally
It's basically 4 pieces of
Correct.
advice, Jeremy. Jeez, it's so damn patronizing. And I got to go back to look at it really quickly. So they said, hey, the middle of the order should be more productive. They should cut down on walks. They should put hitters away. And they should get more from first base. What do you think? Should they do those things?
Oh, that sounds like great tips, Jeremy.
Who wrote that?
I think this is just a list in the Chronicle.
I
I think they're good suggestions. I don't know about you, Jeremy. Are you going to push back on this?
I think we're pretty safe with those 4 things. I would say this. I'd say that I think the bullpen or the rotation, which is the injury part, it's guys are misused. They're miscast. Okay. I've never thought Hunter Brown was a starter. I watched him in the Futures game and I went, it's too straight. It's velocity reliant. It's going to be effective. He's physical, but you put this guy in a bullpen. That's what he's going to be. And you've watched the starts now as the league's adjusted back. He's a reliever for me. Now, Blanco has earned his way into the rotation.
Yeah, change
stay.
is filthy.
Okay, so he's going to stay. Javier, if he's healthy, he's in the rotation too. McCullers, when he comes back, goes into the bullpen. To me, remember Rich Harden when he was here? I've been saying he's Rich Harden since he was drafted. Always breaks.
I wish I could hope that was going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
It would stun me. I know Josh Hader's getting paid a pretty penny. It would stun me if they put a $17 million arm into a bullpen.
And people say that, but do you want to win or do you want to pay somebody $17 million to get hurt?
I agree with you.
I
We saw what Lance did in 2017 in relief.
Yeah.
And I remember it wasn't that long ago where I think Keith Law was on with Joel and Jeremy, and he said that, hey, maybe out of the bullpen would be an interesting way to go for Lance McCullers. But the big problem to what you're saying right now, there's a lot of injuries at this moment in time. You got to figure something out until these guys come back. Because we're talking months here, and I'm looking at that bullpen in particular because the lineup is good enough. We know the lineup is good enough. We know the starting rotation just has to make things work. They're going to have to MacGyver their things together. But I don't know what you do at the back of the bullpen if the guy that you're paying a ton of money in Josh Hader is not looking like what you thought you were going to get.
Yeah.
Ryan DeBreu, same thing. And especially the big tricky thing is Ryan Presley. I mean, I'm at the point now where I'm thinking to myself, okay, do you swap Montero and Presley in their roles because Montero's pitched well and Presley's been a disaster? So how would you fix that specific situation is the one that I feel like the people that are in positions of power need to do something. I don't know what they do, though.
So the worst thing you could do with when something's being successful is mess with it. Right. And Presley, if you watch the last couple of years, he's been successful. It's a lot more grit and a lot more compete and higher stress innings. Right. So maybe it was time to go to the 8th, kind of like what Wetland did with Rivera when Rivera came up. Maybe that was time. However, and look, again, this is maybe I know too much. Maybe I know where the bodies are buried. I don't know. Hader for me is a concern. He was a concern before they signed him.
Interesting. Why is he a concern?
He didn't want to take the ball last year. There's a situation with Josh where if you look in San Diego, he said, nope, I threw too much. I'm not pitching. And that team's in a pennant race.
Right. And he talked about it in the offseason. We played that clip, actually, I think last week.
Yeah, where he said that, I guess it kind of goes back to Milwaukee a little bit too, where when he went to arbitration, they were like, well, you don't have the save numbers. So that's when he said, well, I'm just going to pitch the 9th inning now. When he's a guy who in his career, like we've seen, he struck out 8 guys in one appearance and 8 outs.
Right.
But yeah, he's shown with his words that he doesn't want to do anything. I thought that would go away.
But then last week we heard from Joe Espada where Joe Espada said he only pitches the 9.
Yeah.
So for me, that's not a player I want on my roster. And I'm saying that because I'm not trying to put the guy down. He has value. He fits. He's got an electric arm. But his performance is spotty in different places. It's not all sunshine and rainbows here. And the second part of that is if you're ever telling me, and you're a closer, that you're not taking the baseball on a pennant race, you're done for me. You're just done. I don't want nothing to do with you. Back to wins. We want to look good and feel trendy, or we want to win baseball games. Because ask the city of Houston now, especially a lot of people who decided they were going to come at me like I was enemy number one.
Oh, yeah, they hate you.
Oh, it's beautiful, too, because I love it, PG. I sit there, and I put my he hate me helmet on, and I come out the gate, and I'm like,
smart.
Yeah, and I'm like, let's go,
Let's go.
But it's something where like you want to win games or don't you? And if it's working when you win games, you go tinker with that, and it includes Presley too. And then you try to put it back together. The team is fighting out of a hole. there are, for me, at this point, what are they, 7-16? Does that sound right?
Yeah.
7-16?
7-16.
If there's probably 4 games in there that position differently with personnel, that this team's, 11-12, how's everybody feeling then? With the injuries that are out, with the people that aren't back yet, with the uncertainty, you're still feeling better. Okay, there's zero reason, and I mean this. There's zero reason why they're first in hits. I think that's right. First in hits, top of the league in home runs, top of the league in base runners, and there aren't a place to leave like 1,200 runners on now. Okay, and that's kind of why I gave Branham a hard time about, because he did he's on pace for RBI. I said, well, they're on pace to leave 1,200 people on. So I don't know how that works out. But the point is that at some point you got to drive somebody in, and you got to have some kind of continuity and flow. The lineup that I've suggested to me has an automatic out, and it's just one. The pitching, you're just gonna have to patchwork it together. You have to piggyback some guys. You can't go burn Verlander out. He just got back. He's 41 years old. You're gonna have to. The bullpen, you're gonna have it by committee. I wouldn't hand Hader the ball and say he's in the 9th. I'd say you pitch when I tell you. If you don't like it, give your 17 million.
I know, what the hell?
What's he making? 19 million. Give it back.
Something like that.
It's 95 over 5.
You work for us. Like, I don't work for you. You work for us. We're paying you. You guys come to work at ESPN 97.5. I get to go to work on my off days for KHOU. When KHOU says do something, you know what I do?
You do it?
You got it. Okay, that's how that works.
Yep.
And so if these guys are being paid that much money, you do what they tell you. You go ask these winning baseball players if they like losing like this, what are they going to tell you?
Well, they all look miserable.
The idea that Hader wouldn't want to just do whatever they tell him is weird. And again, I don't know what's going on behind the scenes. I know you're in the same boat. We're talking about one piece of his past that is a reason to rule him out, right?
One public piece of his past.
Oh, well, that is interesting too. Okay. But when you look at a guy like Hader and you're paying him this kind of money, the fact that now he's on a team that has been to 7 straight ALCS, that he wouldn't want to go above and beyond now that he's been paid as well, it's almost impossible to believe for me.
Believe it, Paul. I mean, people are throwing a spot under the bus now too, right? Oh, he's not. Okay, two things there. I'm gonna walk in this. Someone's gonna take me out. When you go underneath and you watch what the respect they have for Joe, they respect him. They want to be around him. There's also a reason why Joe has never been a manager anywhere else. The guy was a hot name for like a decade, and nobody hired him.
A lot of interviews.
And when you look at what this team needs, maybe he just wasn't the right fit for where this team is. This is a veteran ball club. It's not young kids. When AJ got here, AJ had a young group of guys. He was able to develop and grow with them. Lots of times that's how you do that, and then they stay together for whatever amount of time. This was more of a veteran, steady hand. I know how to rest guys. I know how to get guys to hustle and how to motivate them. And it's not saying Joe doesn't, but I'm also saying that if we don't think that maybe his hands are tied a little bit, we're being naive on our side.
Yeah, I would imagine, especially with Dusty Baker and a general manager, where it seemed like there was friction between he and James Click, and Dusty Baker with Dana Brown, where there probably was a little bit of that as well, versus this, where it seems like Dana Brown handpicked Joe Espada. It does. I mean, I get that impression from managers across baseball, and I brought that up with Joe a couple of times, where it does feel like a lot of managers these days are just doing what the general manager tells them to do.
And they're not. Yeah, exactly. And the GMs are looking at numbers and more at bats to what we were talking about earlier, and just saying, this is your lineup. This is when you use guys. I mean, we've seen, Joe Madden in his last book that he put out, he talked about how the Angels GM would call down to the dugout and tell him when to put guys in. I don't think it's to that level now, but there's clearly, like, I'm surprised by the changes that Joe Espada's made with moving Jose Abreu to like the 8th spot. But to what you're talking about at the top of the order, he's not willing to make changes and adjust things there.
All right, so we're going to go down a rabbit hole.
Yeah.
You guys ready?
Yeah.
Okay. I know Perry as well. Perry Manazian, that's the one Madden's referring to. Perry Manazian used to, his dad was the clubby for the Texas Rangers. I promise you this is going to come together, okay? His dad was the clubby for the Texas Rangers for many years. Doug Melvin, who's a retired general manager now, was on my gym in Milwaukee, was in Texas and knew the Manazian brothers, took them to Milwaukee, okay, or took one of them to Milwaukee. Perry, meanwhile, made his other way around the game, ended up in Toronto, working with Dana Brown, working with Alex Anthopoulos. Dana Brown had met Alex Anthopoulos, we know who he is, right?
British,
yeah. In Montreal, and they had gone this route. See what I'm saying? They all collected in Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
The thought process of how they did this together is kind of the same because they all connected. They're different, but they all were together for so many years and they were successful, whether it's Toronto, whether it was the Expos back in the day, whether it was the Nationals, whether it was the Braves, that's what's happening. Here, however, I have legitimate questions over who's telling Dana who to put in the lineup.
Do you think it's possibly above?
Well, what did Reggie say?
Just go back to the
It's
committee.
What did Reggie say?
The Astros Illuminati.
So they're telling you,
Yeah.
they're telling you Dana was here for this, and he's our GM. And lots of times, and I'm not saying this is the situation because I don't know this for sure, but if 2 + 2 = 4 yesterday, I'm pretty sure it's going to equal that today. There's a lot more going on behind the scenes who's making decisions and blaming Joe Espada. Joe Espada is being handed what to do, and he's going to have to go figure out how to make that work. If it's not working that way, and I promise you it's not Dana saying to hit the guy second. I'm not going to tell you who it is. It's not Dana telling you hit him second and stack these guys to the top. Then there needs to be another situation worked out where they can lengthen it and get the pitching back in the right situation. When they say back of the baseball card, you know what that means?
Honestly, please explain this to me. Like
I thought it was like you're stupid. We aren't.
It means not my fault.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That's what it
I'm
means.
kind of figuring it
Yeah,
out.
it means not my fault. And whose fault it is, they're not going to tell you.
Yeah.
They're never going to say it, and we're going to have to guess and speculate. And thankfully, on this side of it, we can do that. That's the job. But when it comes to blaming Dana, that's wrong. When it comes to blaming Joe, that's wrong. When it comes to blaming one person within that group, that's wrong too. Something, though, is fractured because they're not making the right adjustments to work with the club.
Okay, so what's next? They're 7-16. We just talked about this Fangraphs article that projects them to have about 5 weeks left in their season at this pace before they can actually still make a push for the playoffs, right? Just based on the amount of wins they can get. Is this team, in your view, salvageable with everything we've just talked about?
This team itself, to me, can still play in the World Series. You know, and that's some of the stuff that drives me nuts about some of these guys. Oh, you hate Houston. I have Space City tattooed on my tricep.
Hell yeah.
Like it's not hating Houston.
Wait, can I see it?
Yeah. Hating Houston and loving
Holy crap.
and loving,
Wow.
That's sick.
and loving this city.
That's awesome.
That's not.
Yeah. And loving this city is not an issue. It's not about hating the team. It's about being realistic. These guys are still the same winners they were last year and the year before. Maybe a little bit older. That's what happens with time, but they're not out of it by any stretch. They're hurt on the mound. When they come back, the energy they play with behind Verlander, I think we all saw it. We all saw the energy. That tells you they had some confidence in what's there. They have confidence behind Blanco. They obviously believe in Javier, right? Who's obviously on the IL now. But all of that to say, it's salvageable as long as the people that are getting in the way get out of the way. You have to go into a situation where if you have how many runners left on base again? It was a lot. Okay, if you have the entire city of Cinco Ranch, the entire town of Cinco Ranch been left on base already. You might want to start mixing it up to drive guys in because the opportunities are there. And so maybe it's people that can't handle situations and slowing their mind down. Maybe it's people that can't hit to the situation as far as moving the lineup, moving the runners, or trying to ambush baseballs, which swing as hard as they can. We all have our own views on what that could be. And frankly, some of us are wrong and some of us aren't.
Fair.
Okay? But when it comes to what is fixable, this team is still very much a World Series contender. But they better hurry up and get out of their own way.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what I would say is that in the balance for the fans that listen and people that are watching, the balance of how this should be done is you start with subjective. Trust your own eyes. I mean, who you are. Trust your eyes. Trust what you're seeing in front of your face. Then go look at the numbers and see if they support it. And if they don't support it, ask yourself why. That's how you use analytics. You don't sit there and say, hey, this guy's got to hit second because he's got 18 more plate appearances in the 3-hole or 40 more maybe than the 4-hole. How good are those plate appearances? What are they worth? What's the situation like? Is it something that's going to be productive? Would you rather have Pena with those 18 plate appearances don't mean anything or Alvarez?
Pena.
Okay, so if that's where we're going with this and you put Alvarez in a place where he is comfortable to be the 31 to 40 home run guy, to hit 280 to 300 and drive in 140 instead of saying you got to hit second because the stat sheet says so. And it's way beyond that. If he's going to hit second, then you put Pena in the 9 spot. You put Dubon in the 8 spot. And Myers, if Myers isn't good enough to help win a World Series, he's not good enough to play every day right now. Do you understand that?
That I agree with.
If he's not good enough to be on the postseason roster, he's not good enough to start in center field. Dubon's earned that job. You're trying to take it away from him. Run him out there.
Preaching to the choir.
So if you're going to stack it that way, let's just say you leave Alvarez in the 2-hole. All right, let's see him leave him there. Then it's Altuve, it's Alvarez, it's Bregman, it's Tucker, it's Diaz, it's McCormick, and then you have to put whoever you think your first baseman you're going to go sign.
You don't want John Singleton?
Whoever your first baseman is, you're going to go sign in the 7 spot, and then you go Dubon and Pena. I can live with that too, but you're having protection and lengthening in it, so the next time Alvarez comes up in the at-bats that he really does well in, second time around, third time around, those type of at-bats, he's got an opportunity to have 2 or 3 guys ahead of him, and he's seen the guy.
One more thing, just kind of going back to what the struggles we're seeing this year, but back to last year as well. Like, you think back to that Yankee series in which they got swept, and then last month of the season until the playoffs, they really struggled. Like, they got swept by the Royals, the A's. They lost to some bad baseball teams. And then we saw, obviously, through the playoffs, they couldn't hit at home, and they blamed the batter's eye.
Yep.
But I also view one of the issues when I thought about lineup construction was back to last year with Bregman batting second, and that these problems, I feel like, also really showed up in 2023. So I like your point about Jeremy Pena batting second, but they didn't do it last year. So is this something that the front office should have been more aware of going to the offseason, that they had maybe flaws within their roster that they needed to address, and they just didn't do it?
The flaws in their roster as a whole are depth, and it's really first base. Mm-hmm. I'm going to tell you, if I look at their rosters objectively, no matter what they're playing, like the flaws, if I look around the field, start in left field, McCormick, fine. Okay, Dubon in center, fine. Tucker over here, enough said. First base, black hole. Second base, Altuve. Shortstop, Pena. Third base, Bregman. Anybody got any issues?
No.
Okay, Diaz back here. If you put the rotation on paper that's healthy, any issues there either? I don't. And you put the bullpen together with the guys that are up that shouldn't be here back in AAA. Anybody got any issues there? So you're talking about depth, which they haven't addressed 2 years in a row. You're talking about miscasting guys in certain spots in the lineup and injuries, what you're talking about. So for me, those are things that one of them you can control. You can't control the depth now because you didn't address it. So you can't control that. You can't control injuries because guys are going to get hurt, and you can't fix that right now because of where you are. You can control how you use your pieces that are still on the roster and who's healthy. When it comes to 2023, what was the missing piece in 2023? It wasn't here anymore. And I'm not putting Dana down when I say this. I think Dana's great.
Click.
It's James Click. And when we talk about the lineup, you're talking about, and James had his issues too. I love the guy. I know him personally. We have a relationship away. So did Dana. I don't think Dana and Dusty don't have one either away from this too. The game is very, it's very clannish that way. Everybody's connected. Everybody knows each other. There's deeper conversations that will never make the light of day. If they can't work together, then they hate each other. And James Click's issue was sometimes he took too long to make a decision. That's his issue. That was it. Sometimes he needed too many other people to tell him to have groupthink to come together instead of stepping out ahead of it. It doesn't mean he didn't know what he was doing. He did know what he was doing. And if you put his lineup on the field when he was here, Pena was hitting second. With him gone and Dusty in the lineup, where'd Pena hit? 7.
Yeah, 7.
And most of all, what happened then was the protection was gone, right? So we're talking about keeping guys in a situation to be successful. You can live with 1 out in the lineup. You can't live with 3. And the way they're constructed now, they're very easy to pitch to, which is why you're seeing when runners are on, nobody's getting driven in. That's what's happening. You can't do anything about the pitching. You got to patchwork that together until they get back. As far as the hitters, you can adjust that. You can get back to scoring 6-7 a night. If you can't win with 6-7 a night, man, go do something else. Yeah. That's enough.
There we go.
Before we let you go, tell us a little about P15 Sports, Program 15 Sports, New Balance Baseball. What do you do with them? What do you got going on? You said you had, 20 guys? 22 guys?
Yeah, on the top 100. So the short answer is based here in Houston, Texas. When I left scouting, I decided to start something that I thought was going to make a difference. I saw a lot of the trends in the game coming, and I saw the disconnect that was there. And you guys, it's very public. It was a war. It was a war with baseball people and analysts, and it was unnecessary. And I was somebody who I think you could fairly say you wanted to see your player. You want to see somebody go in and you wanted guys in my position to go watch guys play. And I did a lot of it with the clubs that I was with. Very fortunate to have that type of background upbringing. So I want to do something different. Started working with some pro guys here in Houston that I knew. Dylan Thomas, who's in the big leagues briefly. Brady Rogers, who pitched for the Astros briefly. Actually drafted Brady out of high school. And on and on. Some of the guys across the league. And that turned into like this high school deal where it was like, hey, man, this travel ball industry is really messed up. And I was like, what's that? Like, I don't pay attention to that. When you're on the pro side, you don't pay attention. you flash forward 7 years, we have events all over the country. We have stuff in 13 different countries now that's pretty aggressive. New Balance is our title sponsor, 4 major league stadiums, including our main event here in Minute Maid Park this September. And some of the best players in the game that come through this. Some of the best prospects, Ricky Tiedemann, Tink Hens, Grayson Rodriguez is an alumni, Bo Naylor's an alumni, right? So you get to we've been very fortunate to be able to turn that back around, have almost all 30 clubs with us on our advisory board, and they're active. Division I coaches, and junior college coaches to try to find the best way to get the best prospects to be funneled straight to the major leagues. And for all you people who think I'm against analytics, we're so deep in analytics, people ask me how to do it.
Here's Jeremy Booth on
Take
Twitter.
that, pumpkins.
@ Jeremy Booth. Next time you come on, please bring a pumpkin.
Absolutely, man. Good.
I'll bring a clown mask.
Okay.
You can get all going. But thank you for coming on, man.
Thanks,
I
Jeremy.
appreciate it. It was a great conversation, and we'll definitely do it again soon.
Yeah, man.
All right, it's Gallant and George here on ESPN 97.5 and 92.5.